her maiden name, and the Sullivan House is right across from the train station in Menlo Park. You can't miss it. It's the White House. Pimentel had his undertaking parlor in there for a few years. But anyway, Steve went to St. Joseph's School in Menlo Park from 55 to 63, graduated, and then went to Bellarmine. We're soulmates here for grammar school and high school. Bellarmine from 63 to 67. In 1967, Steve joined the United States Marine Corps for a 2-year term. And he was over there in Vietnam. What he did was a helicopter pilot, not a pilot, or what were you?
Gunner.
Huh?
A gunner.
A gunner on the helicopter that took wounded servicemen to a hospital ship. He got out of the Marines in '69 and married Kate D'Angelo, who's here today, his wife. Want to hold your hand up? There you go. She's got the young one there. In 1983, 40 years ago. They have 3 children. Steve, when he got out of the Marine Corps, joined Peninsula Building Materials, the family business, in 1955. And worked there till 1977, at which time he started Morey Trucking Company from 77 to date. He's still working, which is a compliment. So now I'd like to have you come up here, and we want to hear about the legacy of the Morey family in Menlo Park. Here we go. Do you want to use this?
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Morey. I was asked by Lydia Dioli Cooper to make a presentation about the Morey family regarding when the Moreys first arrived in Menlo Park and our history to date. My cousin Gary Morey's wife, Nancy, in the red, started a very thorough investigation of our family roots in America. She found that the earliest records date back over 300 years to Massachusetts, when my ancestor William Morey married Alice Williams, in 1719, as the first generation of Moreys in America. Fast forward to the 6th generation of the Moreys, when my great-grandfather, Henry B. Morey Sr., better known as Harry B. Morey Sr., was born in 1853 in Boston, Massachusetts. By the time he was 22 years old, he had moved west to San Francisco and found work as a mixer for a local stone company. This was also the year he married 18-year-old Rose McGovern, a recent immigrant from County Coven in Ireland. It is thought that Rose was the person who introduced Catholicism into the Morey family, of which most of us continue to practice to this day. Rose gave birth to 7 children, but only 2 of them, John W., born in 1877, and Harry B. Morey Jr., born in 1883, my grandfather, actually worked with their father. Harry Morey Sr. and Rose continued to live in the San Francisco-Oakland area for the next 17 years, while he was involved mostly in the business of artificial stone and concrete work. They first moved to Menlo Park on a temporary basis in 1892, when Harry B. Sr. was working for the George Goodman Company, as a foreman and superintendent for the concrete pour of the foundation of St. Patrick's Seminary. They later poured the foundation for the seminary's tower. They also had work at Stanford University, reinserting the stone rosettes in the corners of the quadrangle arcade, and laid the cement walkway along Palm Drive to the El Camino Real. The people of Menlo Park grew very fond of Henry B. Morey Sr., and he became a leader in the community. He was elected president of the newly formed Democratic Club. He returned to San Francisco after the work at St. Patrick's and Stanford was finished. He continued in politics when he returned to San Francisco as the Democratic nominee for school director, and was also nominated for assemblyman for the 36th district. He stayed connected to Menlo Park and circulated between jobs in both San Francisco and Menlo Park with his sons, including digging out the foundation for the Convent of the Sacred Heart in 1897. He also kept his social connections when he traveled to Menlo with his family to visit friends and go fishing, his new hobby. By 1903, the family of Henry B. Morey Sr. had moved to and was firmly established in Menlo Park. He jumped into politics again, being considered an intelligent man and a good citizen in whom his fellow citizens had the fullest confidence. George Goodman died in 1903, so he then founded the contracting business of Henry B. Morey and Sons. Their first big contract was constructing the concrete foundations for the new library building at Stanford University. In 1905, he had projects in Gilroy, the McBain Summer Resort, the Menlo Park Parochial School, pouring foundations for the new convent on Valparaiso, and the west wing of the Sacred Heart Convent. Mrs. Jane Stanford was so impressed with his work that she awarded his company a contract to construct a wall around the foot of a lone sequoia tree at the San Francisco Bridge to protect it from floods. Morey and Sons went on to secure many high-profile contracts in the Bay Area as his stellar reputation grew. As quoted in the Redwood City Democrat, Henry B. was regarded as one of the most reliable contractors in the business, and such great confidence was placed in his abilities and his honesty that he was given many contracts without having to submit bids. He bears such a high reputation for honesty that his work is not subject to inspections. All of Mr. Morey's work for the county is passed without services of an overseer, and he was the only contractor paid such a compliment. Mr. Morey's bridge and culvert work stand as a monument to his reliability for the ages. Henry B. Morey Sr. then got into gold mining for a few years, briefly in Alaska, and then with a group of men in Northern California, and was actually quite successful at that. He also continued with his political participation in being on the committee to decide the incorporation of Menlo Park, among many other activities. The Morey brothers and families were very close. Together as next-door neighbors on Emily Avenue in Menlo Park, now known as Atherton, he thrived in both business and civic events for more than 30 years of life in Menlo Park. Tragically, his successful life ended in July of 1923 when he died in a car accident on his way to join his family in Santa Cruz. He was 69 years old. He had been married to Rose for 48 years, with Rose dying 8 years later Both are buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Menlo Park. His sudden death that same year propelled my grandfather, Henry B. Morey Jr., into the position of taking over the company. He had a very successful 13 years at the helm. PBM, Peninsula Building Materials, was founded on the values of dependable service, quality materials, prompt delivery, large inventory, and competitive prices. Through his hard work and financial diligence, he developed a firm foundation for a business which just celebrated its 100th anniversary this year. Tragically again, Henry B. Morey Jr. died in 1936 at the age of 53 as a result of a burst appendix. He was married to Amelia Brogi, of Italian descent, for 31 years, and they had 4 children, John, Joe, Kip, and Madeline. Amelia lived a long life and died in 1981. Both are buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Menlo Park. My uncle John B. Morey, the eldest son, was named president of PBM after their father died. Eventually, Warren Kip, my dad, was the vice president, and Joseph P. Morey as secretary-treasurer. The 3 brothers worked very well together and grew the company even more. In 1968, they established a second location in Sunnyvale, now moved to Santa Clara. The original location in Menlo Park was moved to Redwood City in 1981, and the Menlo Park property became a shopping center comprised of CVS, Bevmo, Big Five Sporting Goods, and Staples. Years later, PBM locations were developed in San Martin and Livermore, as well as a masonry showroom in Mountain View. My great-grandfather's brother, John W. Morey, ventured off to become a concrete contractor. His 3 sons were Harry, Frank, and Jack. Frank and Jack established a company called Morey Brothers Concrete. They were finishers. Their older brother, Harry, became the postmaster of Menlo Park, and his career spanned over 36 years. Harry died in 1981. We, the Kip Morey family, also grew up on Emily Avenue. There were 5 homes on Emily by now, and 4 were owned by the Moreys. My Uncle Frank lived at 1 Emily. Uncle Joe and his family lived at 11 Emily. Grandma, Amelia Morey, lived at 17 Emily, and we lived at 25 Emily. Thinking back, it was an idyllic time to grow up. We walked through each other's backyards and shared Sunday dinners, with Grandma being the main cook. Her specialty was Italian risotto. It was an all-day process. I would take my bike to Bruce's Pharmacy on Santa Cruz Avenue with a $20 bill from Grandma to buy 4 cubes of saffron. I brought her back 3 $1 bills. Each day, my father Kip and his brothers John and Joe went to PBM at 700 El Camino Real. As we were often, as kids, we were often at PBM with our dads. One day when I was 7, I was helping Arnold Gerbil, one of our mechanics, and he accidentally spilled a 5-gallon bucket of solvent off the fender of a mixer truck and right on top of me. It was very itchy, and after a phone call to my dad, Arnold brought me home and I had to shower to get it off. That was my introduction to equipment maintenance. All the cousins worked at PBM and would help load vehicles with materials, while the girls, my sister Marie, and cousins Jan and Arlene, Uncle Joe's daughters, worked in the office. We would fill sandbags and load them into the cars for customers. We also pulled on a 2-inch steel handle and opened the chute above their pickup loading 1 or 2 tons of materials, mostly sand and gravel. We all did counter sales with my father and uncles during the summer and learned the basics of selling building materials. We formed a new company, a new concrete company with 2 other companies on the peninsula, Casey Concrete in San Mateo and Anderson Materials in Sunnyvale. It became Cap Concrete Inc., C for Casey, A for Anderson, and P for Peninsula Building Materials. We also bought a company in San Carlos called Cal Tile Company and changed the name to Calstone Company. That was headed up primarily by my cousin Tom Morey, the oldest son of Uncle John. John Morey Jr., middle son of Uncle John, headed up ready-mix sales for Cap Concrete. Joe Morey, the oldest son of Uncle Joe, headed up sales for PBM. Donald Morey was the manager of PBM Sunnyvale, youngest son of Uncle John. My brother Michael also worked in Sunnyvale under Donald. After I got out of the Marine Corps in 1969, I went to work for Cap Concrete in sales under John Jr. Uncle Joe had died of pancreatic cancer in 1962. It was a tremendous loss for the Morey family, as he was a wonderful father, a great businessman, and my favorite uncle. My earliest memory of my dad was his amazing devotion for the Sacred Heart nuns. My father never talked about the war. He was a PT boat captain in the Navy. The one thing he did say was, if I get out of the Pacific alive, I will dedicate my life to the Sacred Heart nuns. Most every night on his way home from work, he stopped by the Sacred Heart Convent to speak with the nuns about their next project. My dad, Kip, passed away of a massive heart attack in December of 1974. And his older brother, Uncle John, passed away in 1988. When Lydia asked me to give a talk about the Morey family, who has been in Menlo since my great-grandfather started here in 1892, I was honored. And after researching when it all began, it gave me great pleasure and pride in realizing that my great-grandfather and grandfather were the ones who instilled a wonderful work ethic combined with honesty and integrity, along with their Christian values that was passed on to their children and grandchildren.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I think you did a great job, and we're going to restore this in our memoirs downstairs in our archives. With that,
I have one announcement.
yeah.
Are there any questions? And can I go through the pictures that Bo took?
Oh, sure. You're more than welcome to. Go ahead.
Going back to the original picture that Bo put on the screen, it's kind of the younger gang. I said we lived on Emily Avenue. Joe Morey is the only one that still lives on Emily Avenue today. My sister Marie is in Fairbanks, Alaska with her family. My brother Michael's down south in Ventura. I'm standing here in front of you. This is my cousin Bill, who also was in the Marine Corps at the same time as I was in Vietnam. And he was an officer, I was enlisted. Billy called me one day and said, "Hey Steve, come on down for lunch." I'm in Quang Tri, way up in northern Vietnam, and he's down in Da Nang. I said, "Bill, how do I get there?" He says, "I'll send a helicopter." That's something an officer could do. I had no idea that I didn't have to walk. So it was wonderful to see a friend and a relative in Vietnam, because it was a scary place. His 2 older brothers that lived at 1 Emily Avenue at Frank's house is Rich and Bob. You can't really see from the pictures, but the Morey family is relatively short. These two guys were concrete finishers, which is very, very difficult work. And I cowered when they came around. They were much taller than any of the other Moreys, and they're much wider. Hard-working guys. And this is Harry Morey, the oldest son of Harry Morey, the postmaster. Those guys, well, I was just going to say, those guys aren't with us any longer. The top roof's still here. Now, here's the main guy that, the first picture, please. Here's the main guy that brought everything to California. Grandpa Henry H.B. Booty Morey, and I don't know where Booty came from, but he led the group in California. And the other thing that he did, and I don't know how, because when I met my parents, i.e., what, 18, 20 years old, when you finally figure out what you got, my father, my Uncle Joe, and my Uncle John were all gentlemen. I saw them run their business, and they were polite and courteous to everybody. They weren't above it all in the least. And that's the man that created that attitude. These are the two sons of that man. My great uncle John, who had Harry, Frank, and Jack. My grandfather had John, Joe, and Kip. And don't forget about Madeline.
Yeah.
Do you have the other
Oh, yeah.
slide? This is a picture of PBM, which is now called, it was always Peninsula Building Materials, but it started in 1923, and this is 23, 100 years later. We pulled the handles, the steel handles, the trucks would drive through this behind here, and the materials were held in the wooden bunkers. And we'd pull the handle and it would dump down into their pickups.
Where is that location?
Location is right across the street, 700 El Camino Real.
What's there now? I don't know.
Bevmore.
Oh, Bevmo.
CVS,
Oh, right there.
Bevmo.
Okay, I remember.
And then this is a picture of the rail spur where we brought materials in from other states. These three pictures are the postmaster, Harry Morey, his brother, Jack, and I wish you could see the other picture of Jack. He's extremely tall, and that's where these guys came from. They're big guys, and this is Frank Morey that lived at 1 Emily Avenue. And they were very hard workers. That's Uncle John at age 22 at Santa Clara University. He was the captain of the baseball team. That was his sport. My Uncle Joe was the captain of the football team. My father, 2 years behind him, was the captain of the then football team. And Santa Clara used to play pretty good football in those days. Uncle John went on to become a professional baseball player at the time after Santa Clara. This is my Uncle John in the middle, the oldest, then Uncle Joe, the next, and my father Kip. And you can see that, you can't tell from the picture, but we're not as tall as the Jack Morey. And we were always a little shy on hair on the front of our heads. But they're the ones that continued on and started Sunnyvale and then their children started San Martin and Gilroy and Livermore.
All right.
Do you want any questions from the audience?
Any questions?
Yes. When was the Peninsula Building Materials structure first erected? What year? At 700 El Camino Real.
Well, I can't specifically tell you. I can tell you that Peninsula Building Materials started in 1923.
But you don't know when that structure was erected.
That, well, you can tell by the car. You're older than I am. What year is that car?
It cost $30,000.
I would think that that structure was probably built in 28, 29.
The late 20s.
I think so.
And when was it taken down?
It was taken down in 1981.
Okay. So
But before that building, can you go back to the other building? Before this building came down, this is how bunkers are made today out of steel. This, being built in the late 20s, is an antique. And it had cables running through it everywhere trying to hold it together, because we had 50,000 tons of material upstairs. And so in earthquakes and rain and all that stuff, there's 3/4 inch cable running throughout that building. We were actually pretty glad to take it down when we were no longer welcome in Menlo Park.
what is that little house-like structure on the very top, and how do people get up there?
You walk up there, and it was a hard walk, and what was up there was a swivel chute. And the materials, and there's a swivel chute up here, and this is a steel bunker, but they put steel or swivels in those buildings also. And the material would go up on an elevator belt, a little shovel-like, and it would bring the material straight up, go over the top, and then dump the material into the bunker or into the chute, so that it could be put in that bunker or that bunker or that bunker or that bunker. Big holding areas for a certain size of gravel, a different size of sand.
It just seems very strange to see that little house on the top. And it seems very odd that somebody would have to go all the way up there, and how would they do that?
Oh, they would walk up either on the outside of those chutes. It wasn't easy. Things were more difficult than they are today. Today we would put an elevator in. I knew the guys that worked at Peninsula Building Materials who were much older than me, and there was guys that would pick up, daring one another, challenging one another, how many sacks of cement can you pick up? And there was this one guy, clearly 6'5", that picked up 5 sacks of cement, which is beyond my comprehension. So people would dare one another as to how we got things done. But you didn't have to go up very often. Because it was covered, the swivel chute was getting the job done, loading all the various bunkers. And these aren't as good as the trucks we've had today. Those were really small engines. We had a tough time getting down the road with 4 yards. And now we carry 27 tons of material in trucks. 2 trucks, 2 trailers. But now we carry 27. We never carried more than 3 or 4 tons down the road in the 30s and the 40s. No other building material questions? Nobody wants to know how to make concrete? In the back.
I have a comment for everybody. The moral of this story, do not name your children after your aunts and uncles.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, good for Jen. That's so confusing.
Thank you again, and I want to
How many?
encourage